That might help. Hello, welcome to this episode of Own Free or Die. I'm your host, Zach Jones, and today we're going to talk about how you, as a business owner, how you should be investing your profits from your business over the coming year, 2 years, over the coming recession period, period of a bad economic climate. Now, I discussed last week the importance of hoarding cash. And that was really specifically about your business. But today we're going to talk about you, the individual, the profits that you're taking out of your business. What's the best way you can leverage those over the coming years? So every day, there's more and more indicators that I'm seeing of a recession. And I touched on last week, don't get hung up on definitions. I know that technically, recession refers to a period of declines in the markets. And look, we're not talking about the markets. We're talking about, Main Street America, real world, the average household's financial situation. And whether you want to call it a recession or a bad economic climate, doesn't matter what you want to call it. The point I'm getting at is don't get hung up on definitions. Tough times are ahead for a lot of households, a lot of people, and a lot of businesses. So it doesn't really matter what words we use or what the exact definition is. When I say recession, you know what I mean, okay? Now, in my opinion, it's indisputable that the economy is worsening, and there are a lot of hard and soft indicators out there. The hard indicators, the clear data. Let's start with layoffs. I saw a stat yesterday that, Meta, Facebook, 13% of their workforce laid off. Twitter, 50%. A lot of that is due to Elon's changes, but Intel, 20%. Netflix, 450 people. Stripe and Lyft, 13%. Salesforce, 2,000. Amazon, 10,000. Amazon letting people go in the fourth quarter seems a bit odd. And I saw just last night, I didn't have a chance to verify it, but I did see a headline that FedEx is laying off some of their drivers, which it's mid-November. That's crazy. So, just the stats I just gave you, that's over 120,000 people right there just laid off. And a lot of these, these aren't, again, I touched last week on, these are going to be a little bit higher earners, I think, being laid off than perhaps 12 to 15 years ago, the last, the Great Recession that we went through. So, you start seeing this data and you start wondering, well, how many small businesses are laying people off that we're never going to hear about in the news, that we'll probably never know about unless either it's our business or someone we know personally. The media never really pays attention to small businesses, which of course is part of the reason that Own Free or Die exists in the first place. But, no doubt, especially over the coming months, there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of businesses laying off one, two, or a handful of people. That adds up very quickly. And, small business layoffs will easily surpass these 120,000 layoffs at these huge companies. And so in addition to the layoffs, we're seeing consumer credit card debt is increasing rapidly. From Q3 21 to Q3 22, consumer credit card debt, total debt across the United States rose 15%, the fastest rise in over 20 years, even faster than, the Great Recession. The new total of consumer credit card debt nationwide is just under $1 trillion, $930 billion. A lot of that is probably due to inflation. A lot of that's probably due to the increased car payments of people that bought a car in the past couple of years. And, people have to start making decisions about what they're going to pay and what they're not going to pay. Now, that's some of the hard data, some of the hard indicators. Again, we could dedicate a whole show to this. I don't really want to spend too much time. I just want to convince you of kind of what we're up against. Some soft indicators. I know personally, I'm getting advertisements from companies like crazy for Christmas shopping. Companies that traditionally don't do coupons or discounts, I'm seeing some of them being pretty proactive with discounting and coupons this year. And then the companies that typically you'd expect to have a marketing presence this time of year, they seem to be much more aggressive than normal. I have a lot of companies that have already sent us 3 or 4 catalogs at home. And then, you're just seeing, my wife and I were talking the other night, television commercials. It's not uncommon in November to see lots of Christmas commercials once Halloween passes, but they seem to be more aggressive this year. And it could just be me, but it seems to just be more of them, maybe is the best way to look at it. And I can't quantify that. It just seems like it to me. So, and that's not really rocket science, people offering discounts and coupons, but it's just every day I see little indicators, things that just show you that a lot of companies, a lot of people are worried, and they're trying to do whatever they can to increase revenue or just make as much money as they can before Christmas, before we get into perhaps a tougher climate. Now, again, this isn't rocket science. It's not unexpected. The crazy inflation we've seen, the scarcity we've seen, it was bound to result in lower consumer spending, lower consumer confidence. That was expected. It's not like I'm telling you things today that most of you probably weren't expecting to hear. But now the data is starting to show it, right? The debt's increasing, the layoffs are happening. We're there, okay? The recession that we knew was coming, regardless of what Biden says or how he defines it or what the media says, we're in it. And I'm afraid it's only going to get worse. So tough times are ahead, but there's always a silver lining. And I know that sounds callous, but hear me out. I know that millions of people are going to lose jobs. That sucks. That's terrible. Some people, if you get online in some of the real estate circles and real estate investing circles, some people are almost rooting for the housing, bubble to pop and things like that. That's not at all what I'm doing. I think that's despicable. But, please understand, I'm not making light of the situation. I'm not taking pleasure in any of the things that are going on. But the fact remains that you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your business to do, whenever an opportunity presents itself that could grow your revenue or improve your situation, you owe it to yourself and your employees and everyone to take advantage of that opportunity. And the best deals are typically found in some of the worst times. Look back at the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon was trying to get his war chest ready for potential war with Britain, and we obviously got a great deal out of that. That's just one example I kind of pulled out of the air. But you could also hop on Zillow and look at homes that sold in the early 2010s, what they sold for, compared to the market today. I mean, times like these are when you're going to get the best deals. And again, I'm not saying take advantage of people or anything like that, but many businesses, investors, property owners, they're going to be looking to cut losses. They're going to need cash. And, some people are going to think this sounds callous again, but, they need someone like you to buy what they have. Even though it may be a highly discounted price, they need that cash. They've made that decision to sell, and you're helping them, make a bad situation a little bit better while giving yourself or your business an opportunity. Now, again, I talked last week a lot about what your business needs to be doing to prepare for this recession. And if you missed that, I hope you go back and watch or listen to that episode. But again, today we're talking about you, and you should always be looking to reinvest your business profits. And I'm aware that the next few years, for a lot of us, that could be more difficult. Profits may be harder to come by, depending on what industry you're in. But, keep in mind, every year, this time of year, you see people saying, well, I've made this at much revenue, and I'm going to have to pay this much in tax, so I need to go spend some money so I don't have to pay as much tax. And if it's a purchase that you legitimately need to do, or that would help, that you can directly connect to growing your business, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Make that investment, reduce your tax burden, and hopefully it'll result in long-term, revenue boost. But sometimes we see people make decisions using that logic that they don't have to make. Like, oh man, I'm gonna have to pay $100,000 in taxes, so I'm gonna go buy a new car, or whatever. Those are the types of decisions I want to discourage you from making, especially this year. I really think you need to be hoarding all the cash you can get. Now remember, if you're a single member LLC or a pass-through entity or a disregarded entity, at the end of the year, any profit that's in your bank account, whether you take it out of that business account and give it to yourself or not, you're going to be taxed on it as your income. So, make business purchases where they make sense. But, sometimes I hear people say, well, I don't want to take money out of the business to make a personal investment. I want to leave it in the business. Well, if you've got the profit in there, you're going to be taxed on it either way. So you may as well go ahead and take it out and figure out something to do with it, especially as we head into a recession. You want to keep plenty of cash in your business for many months of expenses, but you do not want to start sacrificing your own savings or your own prop money that you want to give to yourself to keep the business afloat. And we touched on that last week. But so keep in mind that just by taking the money out at the year's end and giving it to yourself, you're not increasing the tax you're going to owe or anything like that. So if you're on board and you want to figure out a way to, outside of your business, the money you've made and that money that you are paying yourself, how you can leverage that, where do we get started? And the first step is a pretty basic one. And I'm going to tell you to put that money into a high yield savings account. Now, this happened to me. I kind of forgot that these savings accounts even existed because the last couple of years, the rates they were paying were just horrific, right? I know 3 or 4 years ago, it was pretty easy to get, maybe 2 to 3% if I recall. But the last couple of years, they were well under 1%. So I just kind of quit paying attention to them. And then the other day, I noticed the rates were increasing as you would expect. But I saw some rates just a couple weeks ago in the low 2s. I think Goldman Sachs was paying 2.3 or 2.6, and they've since increased that to 3.0%. And that's not a CD. That's just a straight, high yield savings account. And so 3% right now, just put your money in there. Talk to your banker. If not, go to one of the online banks like Goldman. And I'm sure those rates may even increase to make it more and more competitive. And there are some CDs paying better than that. I know I saw one paying 3.6, but that was before the Goldman rate went up to 3. So there may be CDs paying even higher now. That was just for a 12-month CD paying 3.6. But I don't want to have my money in a CD. I want my money to be liquid so that when the opportunities we're going to discuss today come along, I'm ready to pounce. I don't want to be locked into, having my cash locked into a CD. And I know some people will say, well, you don't need to be hoarding cash because inflation, is rising faster than whatever interest you're going to make. I get that, but you need to hold the cash until these deals start coming along and these opportunities come along, or else you're not going to be able to take advantage of them. Because debt is going to be much more difficult to come by. If you are able to get some sort of leverage, it's going to be very expensive, at least compared to what you're probably paying for debt the last few years. So my personal financial situation, I obviously keep several months of expenses just in a checking account or in a savings account, sort of separate from where I may make some investments. So I've got that peace of mind of knowing that I'm never going to spend more than I need to. I've always got that comfort level. But, while I'm waiting for those opportunities to come along, I'm making interest. And 3%, that's not a ton of money, but compared to the last couple of years, that's way more than we could have made. So that's the first thing I would do is whatever money you have now, put it in a high yield savings. And if you, have profits from your company over the coming weeks that don't plan on spending within the business, go ahead and take them out and throw them in there as well so that you're ready to go. So what types of opportunities should we be looking for? And I'm going to start with real estate. A longtime favorite of entrepreneurs is real estate investing. Owning a portfolio, it provides you cash flow, mailbox money, as I call it, while also having assets for the future, assets that you can sell one day for your retirement, assets that are going to be there and that are going to have value, or assets that you could even potentially pass on to your children or grandchildren that they could enjoy and profit from. So, real estate's been very common for entrepreneurs, as sort of side hustles, if you will, side investments for many decades. But the past few years, it's been very difficult to find good deals. I first learned about real estate investing from my father when I was young. He had multiple rental properties. So the first sort of knowledge I have came from him, and I remember him always telling me about sort of that initial rule of thumb that ideally you should buy a property that 1 month of rent from that property would equal about 1% of what you paid for the property. And the past couple or 3 years, or at least past couple of years, that's been almost impossible. At least the markets that I've looked at and where I live. Living in Florida, obviously our real estate's been through the roof. But even in some of our more, non-beach, non-resort communities, the real estate's still been sky high. And the other markets I've looked at, it's just been prohibitive. If I want to get anywhere near that 1% a month, those deals haven't existed, at least not on the market. And I know obviously if you have the time, you can try and network and build those connections with the property owners and, try to cut out some of the middlemen, but that's very time consuming. And so for someone like myself, I just don't have the time to have those relationships. But thinking about, in the past year, I purchased only one property. I think in the past, I know at least 1 year. It was early 22. And I was able to get a good deal on that. The seller was in kind of a unique situation. So I was able to structure my offer in a way that benefited them and helped them out with what they were dealing with. And I got a great deal on it. And I've already got a tenant in there with a pretty favorable lease. So I'm happy with that. But that's about the only deal I've come across. I made an offer on a couple properties a week or two ago. And, we'll see how that goes. But, we talk about real estate and I talk about how crazy it was, but values are starting to come down, okay? Many, many markets. I know just anecdotally, a local realtor that I love, she sends out sort of a daily email with the new and updated listings. And now almost every day, every listing has declined in price. And look, that's, I guess, to be expected. But if you look at most markets online, I'm going to show you a chart. These are home values from markets that have decreased 5% or more from their 2022 peak, not from their COVID peak, but just from their peak earlier this year. All these markets that you see on your screen have decreased at least 5%. In Austin, some of them closer to 10%. Now you'll notice that it's not bad news everywhere. There's not a single Florida market on this list, for example. There's obviously still areas where real estate hasn't started such a stark decline. And I also want to note that this isn't automatically bad news, right? Just because I think we all were expecting that at some point there was going to have to be a correction of some kind. These crazy prices and the crazy increases they're not sustainable. People buying homes sight unseen, that just couldn't go on forever. So we knew that was going to happen. But, those crazy prices are behind us. But the prices are definitely declining. And, I think how much are they going to decline? I don't know. It's going to vary by region. But when you look at mortgage rates that are much higher, a lot of people just aren't going to be buying a home right now. And that's creating kind of a cycle. I've read that part of the reason the mortgage rates are higher is because demand for homes is lower. So those are feeding each other. Demand goes down, mortgage rates go up, mortgage rates go up, demand goes down. That's a pretty dangerous, slippery slope that we're on. So how low are prices going to go? It's going to depend on the market. But, definitely we're seeing those decreases starting. And obviously they're going to be motivated sellers. You're going to have not just homeowners, but perhaps investors or that are now not so sure they're cut out for investing. A lot of properties were purchased in the last few years at crazy prices. And a lot of those are going to be back on the market for a lot less than those people paid. And don't forget about commercial property as well. Businesses may be struggling, owners may be retiring or wanting to sell or at least downsize. Maybe they're going remote and they don't need their office space anymore. There's a ton of scenarios that could lead to commercial space coming on the market as well. I actually made an offer on a couple units a week or two ago, as I was saying, and I thought they were asking a little too much. And I made an offer, They declined it, but they've since countered 3 separate times with new offers, and they're getting closer and closer to my initial offer. And this is just a span of over a few weeks. So they're not desperate yet, but clearly they're getting a little anxious. And I think that probably is representative of the market as a whole. No one out there is probably desperate yet, unless you're one of the people that's already lost your job. But people are just getting anxious. And if they're in a home that maybe they could barely afford a year ago, or they're in a property and maybe now they're thinking, hey, we need to get out of this before the prices get even lower, let's start selling. But with that in mind, I don't recommend buying right now unless you just get a hell of a deal. Like, I think prices are going to continue to decline. And I would recommend you do what I did. Make a lower offer. You may piss them off a little bit. Who cares? They don't have to accept it. But, wait for the prices to come lower. Just be patient. If you do make an offer, make a low offer. I call it kind of a pre-COVID offer. The offer I made in that commercial space or those spaces was kind of what I thought they were worth a couple of years ago before COVID. And they were asking kind of a COVID price, but they're realizing that the buyers of the COVID prices are gone. We're going to have to start getting back to some more realistic numbers. So the deals will come. Just be patient, keep an eye out. But most importantly, be ready to deal, be ready to close. If a deal comes along, you're not the only person out there that's looking for investments. You've got to be ready, and one of the best ways you can have an advantage is if you're ready to close. If you're a cash buyer, that's a big advantage, but just be ready to close. Don't find a property and then go, if you're planning on financing it, don't wait till you find a property to go talk to your lender, because that's slow. That's going to take time, and that could cost you the deal. Go ahead and meet with your lender now and say, hey, if I wanted to purchase these types of properties, what are we looking at? Can get some sort of pre-qualification, pre-approval in place and have that ready to go. Just like if you're doing a personal mortgage, right? Same process. But a lot of times investors, they don't get that ready up front. So I would encourage you to be ready to close. Now, outside of real estate, that's a lot of times where people stop looking for ways to invest their funds. My other way that I would recommend you, or other opportunity I would recommend that you consider, is businesses. My favorite investments either have a dividend or cash flow. Some variant of cash coming to me on a regular basis. I don't like long-term, hold and sales or anything like that. And, real estate obviously generates cash flow, but so do businesses, and they're oftentimes overlooked. And I understand you already own one, at least one, but have you considered buying another one? I'm not suggesting that you try to run multiple businesses unless you're positive you can handle that and that you're cut out for that. That's not for everyone, trust me. But purchasing a business that already has a leadership team in place, or someone that you trust that you can put in charge of that business to run it for you with minimal oversight from yourself, that could be a fantastic investment. And I'm not, I know some people, when I talk about buying businesses, they think you're just buying a struggling business. Who would want to buy a struggling business during a recession? I'm not necessarily suggesting you do that. There's incredible risk with that. But businesses are not necessarily going to sell or be for sale because they're struggling or failing. Oftentimes the owners are just ready to move on, or they've got health issues, or they kind of see the recession coming and they decided that they just don't want to have to put in 2 or 3 more years of work to get through it. And they're just ready to cash out and retire and be done with it. And that can be where you step in and get an incredible opportunity. It's a win-win for both parties. Again, you're not taking advantage of anyone. It's a win-win. So, it's something I haven't done. I've wanted to do. I'm always looking for businesses to purchase. Me personally, I've just never found the right deal that I felt was right for me. I've been very particular. I'm glad that I have been. Several deals that I've walked away from, I've looked back and I think, oh God, thank you so much for not letting me buy that. I'm glad I held firm on my price or whatever the situation was. But so make sure it's the right opportunity for you. And you can communicate with brokers. Most large markets have business brokers. You've got bizbuysell.com you can keep an eye on. But in those situations, you're going to pay more. You're going to be potentially in a battle for that purchase. I would tell you, just think about businesses you like. businesses that you know. Either it's an industry that interests you or that you like, or maybe it's just an actual business that you patronize that you like and you've always thought it'd be fun to own this. I know there's a small little motel that my wife and I frequent. I don't want to say where it is because they may listen to this episode. I've never spoken to them about it, but we travel a good bit. There's one motel we've stayed at a few times that I always thought was just a neatest little property and be a fun little business to own. I don't want to work at a motel full time behind the desk or anything like that. But if I had the right person to run it for me, it'd be a nice little revenue stream. It's something that I would enjoy because it's in a location that I really love visiting. So something like that. Think about a business you know. You never know what the mindset or what the situation is of that owner until you just talk to them. You're not going to insult them. You're complimenting them that you love their business enough that you would want to own it. So you're flattering them. So just think about that, and you're never going to know unless you reach out. You've got nothing to lose. But you might be surprised how many owners are kind of ready to move on. And, depending on what their revenue is and how large it is, you may or may not have the cash to make that purchase. You may or may not get an SBA loan or whatever. But there's a lot of creative ways you can make those purchases work. One is that I've seen done before. You can buy the real estate, buy the building they're in or the land they're on. And then, so the seller gets some instant cash from that transaction. And then you just structure your deal around future revenue. So the seller gets X percentage of revenue or X percentage of profits for X number of years. And that way you're not having to come up with a ton of cash. And that also helps you determine just how confident that seller is in their business, if they're willing to do that. So there's a lot of ways you can structure those deals that could be beneficial for both buyer and seller. Now, beyond investments, those are the two that I really look at the most. Real estate and businesses, we're talking personal to you as investments. We're not talking about your business in this episode. The third thing we're going to talk about is just splurging. And, part of the fun of, being an entrepreneur is hard. You're working way more than 40 hours a week. You bust your ass every single week. You've earned the right to splurge here and there, right? To take a nice trip, have a nice house, have some toys in the driveway, whatever it may be. But obviously you want to do that responsibly. There's a balance to everything, everything within moderation. Every time I see like a G-Wagon going down the road, they're beautiful cars. But I always wonder, one day are they going to regret spending that much money on that car? Or that at some point they're going to wish, man, I wish I hadn't spent that $300,000 or whatever. I was talking to the GM of a Mercedes-Benz dealership, and he was just saying he had just sold another G-Wagon, and he was just waiting on the buyer's check to clear. They were going to come pick it up because they had paid cash. And he said that he had sold 3 G-Wagons in a 6-month time frame, each of them for $300,000. Each of them were paid in cash by the buyer. And the thing about G-Wagons, I don't know a ton about cars. I know pre-COVID, their sticker price was the high 100s, like 175, 195, somewhere in there, depending on the options. And then now he sold 3 for $300,000 a piece. So he netted an extra $100,000 on each of those, in addition to whatever his base gross would have been from sticker. And that's just insane. And he's, I see people that do that. And I'm not criticizing it. I'm not judging it. I don't know how much money they made. That could be a drop in the bucket for them, right? But you do wonder. You see someone make an expense like that, and you're like, in 20 years, are they going to be glad they bought that G-Wagon? Or are they going to wish they had $300,000 in the bank? I don't know. Everyone's different. So when I talk about splurging, I just talk about doing it responsibly. But we're all adults. We can all make our own decisions. But, and just because it's a recession doesn't mean that we have to, if we're still making money and we still have money in the bank, it doesn't mean that we have to not live the lifestyle that we've worked hard for. We don't have to be a douche about it, but we can also still enjoy the things we've worked hard for and the financial freedom that we've worked for. And I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is travel. I love to travel, but there's different types of trips, right? There's a a trip to the for a week to the beach with your family. Then there's a there's a 2-week cruise around the world, or a transatlantic cruise. There's different levels of trips, and if there's a bucket list type trip that you've always wanted to take, there's a very good chance that it's going to be a lot cheaper the next year or two than it would have been the past perhaps 5 or 10 years. So I've already seen some destinations offering some promotions and discounts. Nothing major yet, but they're definitely heading in that direction. They're definitely realizing that their business is slowing and that they're going to have to do more to get people to travel to those destinations or to take those cruises, whatever the case may be. And I expect that to accelerate. So if you've got a bucket list trip, the next year or two could be a great time to do that. Think about toys. I mentioned cars, boats. I know boat prices have started to come down here in Florida where I live fairly compared to a year ago. I've been semi in the market for a boat for a couple of years. I haven't pulled the trigger. I just don't know if I'd use it enough to justify it. But I watch the market. I watch prices. And compared to last, fall and winter is obviously the best time to buy a boat. And compared to last fall and winter, prices are way down. And I would expect them to be even lower next year. So, things like that, watches. I saw a headline the other day that, the average Rolex, the pre-owned market, they're down over 20% just in the last 12 months. So all these kind of toys and splurges that you may be thinking about are going to be a lot cheaper the next year or two. So if you've ever been wanting to buy that boat or to buy a Swiss, high-end watch or whatever, those types of things, a nicer car, a nice, weekend drive or whatever, this could be the time to do that. Lots of people use their free COVID money to make these types of purchases. And A, they overpaid, and now B, instead of using that money to grow their business or to have it in the bank to protect against a recession, now they're kind of between a rock and a hard place, and they're going to be selling those things they bought for a lot less than they paid for it. And that's just going to drive prices even lower. So this could be a chance for you to capitalize on that. They're going to be cash hungry. Now, again, this is if you've earned it, you've worked your ass off, but you just want to balance. What I always ask myself, like I was talking about that G-Wagon example, anytime I'm making a purchase that isn't necessary, that's more than, if it's a decent amount of money, I just ask myself, 10, 20 years from now, am I going to look back and be glad I took this trip or be glad I bought this car? Or am I going to wish I had that money in the bank? And that's usually sort of the best way that I've found to balance it out and determine what is and is not worth purchasing. But also, you don't want to spend money at the expense of your other opportunities. It's better to overpay for a boat or a car at the top of the market than to buy something now and in 3 months have an opportunity to grow your business or to buy some real estate investment and not have enough cash to do it because you just dropped $250,000 on a boat or whatever the case may be. You always want to be thinking about long-term growth. So that's all I've got today. We covered sort of how I approach, how I invest my funds, and hope that was helpful to you. I think the main thing, both in your business, in your personal life, your personal finances, you've got to start hoarding cash as much as you can so you're ready for these opportunities when they come along. I'd love to hear what you did investment-wise during the last recession, the Great Recession, or even during COVID, and as well as what your plans are for the coming year or two, how you plan to not just weather the storm, but to be ready and what types of opportunities you might be looking for. So leave a comment below, shoot me an email, show@ownfreeordie.com. We may discuss those in a future episode. Friday, I'm going to be talking about an incredible conversation I had with another owner. He asked me what I thought about hiring a liberal employee. So we're going to tackle that. I look forward to talking to you then.